The morning dispatch was total chaos at Inclusive Networks, a multi-county subcontracting broadband company. Every man was a 1099. Don was all over this 4,000-square-foot bullpen pandering and panhandling with an array of items for sale. You name it, he had it. Magazines, football jerseys, ball caps, and plenty influence over a fleet of independent contractors. And that's the main reason Don would never make it to supervisor. The higher-ups were afraid of his power, and of course they were big-time thieves. So another mouth to possible cooperate with any corporate authority was out of the question. Inclusive Networks' dispatch office was mayhem each and every morning. Supervisors handed out routes and backcharge fines for missing or stolen equipment and damages. Technicians would damage people's homes, cheat the customer out of full service. Some stole credit cards and money right in their faces. Across from the dispatch office was a barn with an open counter barn door. Mr. Jonathan ran that service counter. He was diligent and accurate on internet modems and cable boxes returns. No matter if a modem was lost in the system, Mr. Jonathan would and could find it. All of the technicians would complain about how Mr. Jonathan was busting their balls about chargebacks and fines over equipment. No one in the entire company liked Mr. Jonathan except for his silent partner brother, an old tech named Brad, and Don. Mr. Jonathan took a liking to Don because he would actually stand in complete hypnosis watching how Don would sell goods to a sea of contractors. Mr. Jonathan would say, "Only if that boy would use that skill to sell with this broadband," as he watched from afar, Don constantly shoving $20 bills into his pocket from each sale. Inclusive Networks was totally based on ripping off the mother company Warner Vision and its own techs. Most techs were either too in debt with back charges, financial illiterate, or just was too lazy to do their own math. Paychecks were forked out on what the technician was intelligent enough to bill for, and so Don learned fast from Mr. Jonathan how to manipulate the system as inclusive. It didn't matter what route the supervisor handed Don, he would turn a lousy route into a $1,000 route. Many nights hung over and broke day with Don hanging aerial broadband line 30 feet in the streets high in the sky, adjacent to telephones lines that ran to people homes. Inclusive Networks was an interesting atmosphere to work at. No one ever knew what the day would unravel. Don spoke to every tech to make sure no tech was left behind on anything they needed to order from him as a tech named Otis spoke. "Hey Don, what are you doing after work? There's an event happening in Chapel Hill, maybe we can meet up there later on." Don just nodded his head and started up the engine to his work van to prepare for his long route for the day. Pulling out of Inclusive Networks' gate, Don noticed a long black foreign sedan sitting by the gate as soon as you enter. The car has been parked there for several days when it comes to Don's recollection. He drove past the car and felt an indescribable feeling he felt passing by. He shook it off and headed up the highway to the town of Creed more to start his route. Later on, Otis did as he said he would do, and he phoned Don to come on out to accompany him in Chapel Hill at the Apple Chill, an annual local town event. Otis didn't know that Don lived on a side street slightly off the main drag in Chapel Hill. In minutes, Don changed out of his work uniform and grabbed his DVD video camera and left his 3-bedroom flat to hit the main street to meet up with Otis. Crowds of people were everywhere. Bikes, cars, men and women saturated the businesses in and around Main Street. It was a vivid car and bike show. Loud noise was made from mufflers and tires screeching nonstop every second of the hour. Otis and Don turned the corner of Orange Street and encountered a line of foreign cars, and that same long black sedan that was at Inclusive Networks' lot was parked closest to the corner. Otis starting running his jibs about who's who and who all the guys were who owned those vehicles, and the black sedan was owned by his older brother. Otis thought he had impressed Don by bringing him around the crowd of unknown suspicious men. What he didn't know, Don was far removed mentally from the scene. Don felt that same eerie feeling he felt back at the job site. To curb the feeling, he quickly started recording on his handheld DVD recorder and rushed home to carefully watch the playback. Things at Inclusive Networks started to change as tons of fines and suspensions came down the pipe from the higher-ups. Eventually, Inclusive Networks lost their business license, and techs were dispersed into the broadband Craigslist for hire pages, while some went underground, connecting broadband illegally. Don was one who went off the grid. He had the keys to the city, so he would cut on and off his private client's broadband service at will. In weeks, inclusive networks faded off the city's map as if it never existed. Don got a call from his old tech buddy Brad, an old slewfoot lumberjack broadband installer. Brad was known as the Old Pimp around Inclusive's broadband yard, because he always bestowed words of jewels upon people's ears. The techs looked at Brad as an old superstitious fool. Don looked at Brad as an uncle with good country sense. Brad told Don he's been working over at a new broadband company named STX, and he was already supervisor. Don just laughed, wondering how did Brad make it to supervisor, and at Inclusive he was the back charge king. He remembered clearly seeing Brad's name leading the list of back charges that was posted up daily in the dispatch office. Techs would search for their name and poke at Brad since he was always first on the list. Don took heed to Brad's offer and joined beside him to install broadband throughout the entire northern counties up the highway. Broadband was a hard-working man's game. The best techs would either work alone or have people under them working, organizing, or riding along. Inclusive didn't care as long as the routes were done on time and correct to their standard. Don installed some broadband at a bulldagger's house. Instantly they had hit it off as companions, and Solja tagged along to help Don finish his daily route. They both worked into the late evening hours installing broadband, as Don noticed that Solja was very talkative with the homeowners. He brushed it off as if Solja was being friendly and open since they were in the home of strangers. In and out of the restroom, Solja went disappearing throughout the vast house. The job was finally complete, and Don grabbed the homeowner's signature upon the work order and headed back to STX's base. He dropped Solja off and retired for the night to prepare for the next day. Several days had passed, and walking in STX's office, Don was summoned by the Durham's police department for questioning of a theft that happened in the past. A theft? Don had questioned his conscience, ending up clueless. STX's general manager Alex and route manager Allie sat down in the control office with Don to explain the severity of accusations placed against him. Alex handed Don a printed of credit card transactions made the night of his last install. Within 24 hours, 10 fraudulent purchases have been made all over the country. Don recognized one of the transaction timestamps and said, "This is impossible because I will still here at STX turning back in my work bin and equipment at that exact time. I can't be in two places at once. You can ask Ali, the manager, a tall, dark-skinned Nigerian 6-foot male who always wore dark shades, even while indoors." Ali nodded his head Don's statement to be true. Don had pondered for a minute and said, "That bitch. I had a ride along to help me on my last run." Don rushed on down to the police station to plead his case with Officer CS. CS was one of Don's good friends he knew before he became a sheriff. CS was down and dirty as they come, besides cleaning his appearance up upon joining the force. Don entered the interrogation room and explained that he had a ride-along and only knew the bulldagger by her nickname and the whereabouts he met her before the incident. Don wouldn't speak too much as CS pulled him to the side and said, "Homie, whoever this chick is, she's saying you stole the credit cards, but I know you don't steal." Of course, CS knew Don wasn't a thief because they had moved loads of cocaine together several years ago before CS graduated from the academy. CS showed Don the IP addresses to the mobile devices Solja used to make the purchases. Then he said, "We will catch her. This case is labeled a code red because she stole from the Attorney General of the state." Don said, "Well, get on it. Why are you wasting time with me? I only been around the girl for several hours. I never seen her before. I don't even remember what she looked like. Even if you had a picture of her, I wouldn't recall her features." Don threw up the deuce fingers sign and walked out the station. Don knew CS wasn't lying about Solja saying he stole the credit cards from Attorney General Gaskin's home. CS was Don's landlord, and if he thought Don did a hideous crime like that, he could easily wake Don up in the middle of night at his property on 301 Strawberry Lane. STX laid Don off with a lengthy apology letter due to his outstanding work history with the company. Not knowing Don knew that CS had closed his case during their visit. Don took the surprise break as a time of self-preservation and went over the Brad house to catch him up with the case. Brad lived over in Mactown, a row house neighborhood with auto repair shops that hugged each end of the corners of Barnes and Hargrove streets. Don and Brad sat around his junky apartment talking about the old Inclusive Networks days with laughter. The connection between the two men resembled a nephew and uncle duo. Brad showed Don how he had rigged his entire house with running Cat 5 cables and how he had the clearest high-speed broadband signal in the city. Brad and Don talked for hours, then Brad said, "There was always a black sedan parked from time to time in the parking lot at Inclusive. I stood away from them guys. They appeared to be of bad news." Don got that eerie feeling and thought back in the past as well, thinking about his hustling mornings at Inclusive Networks' bullpen of techs fighting over routes. Don promised Brad he would see him again soon and returned home to figure out his new life. As days passed by, Don had searched his mind thoroughly on reaching new heights. He just couldn't figure out which endeavor would take him there. He kept his pact with God he would never return to the streets after pulling a 5-year stint in prison. At times, Don felt like two angels were fighting on his shoulders for his attention. Don fought on an everyday basis to keep his mind straightforward, focusing on the positive possibility of living the best crime-free life he could. Knowing where he came from, that was like having a penny with a hole in it, in your pocket. Otis called Don and invited him out with his video camera to help him capture a moment of him performing at a local open mic. Don accepted and met Otis and his crew at Lucky's open mic at a local bar and lounge. Inside the lavish lounge at stage stood Otis and 3 other men who were dressed alike. Red and black sweat jackets with A.M.E initials monogrammed crossed the men's back and left chest corner. Later to discover that the abbreviation stood for Ace Money Entertainment. Entering the room silenced, followed a short, stout man walking on his toes with both hands in his sweat jacket's front pockets. He spoke with a loud, thunderous, obnoxious voice in Otis's direction. "Y'all get that shit together." He walked up to Don and said, "Who are you?" Before he could answer, Otis intervened. "This is Don Boy from Inclusive Networks. He doesn't work there anymore. He's down with us now. He's my cameraman." And just like that, Don was unknowingly pulled into the hellfire. Otis turned to Don and smirked, forcing him to play along, and said, "This is my older brother Ace. He don't rally care about this music shit at times. But since you both are the same age, maybe you can convince him we all can get rich in this line of work." Don didn't know what to say. He just shook his head yes, and went to load up his camera for the first take. The house engineer drummed up a sound check, and Otis and his hype men had hit the stage. Don bobbed his head amazed at Otis's performance and found his new job position, the new cameraman for A.M.E. The show was over, and the entire crew headed to an upscale restaurant for dinner and to shoot the breeze. Every man at the 5-star dining table for 16 wore red and black regalia. Don felt out of place and right at home at the same time. He used to eat in restaurants of this caliber in his past, dressed in suits and gaiters, not t-shirts and ball caps like A.M.E. The entire time of their encounter, Ace has been closely watching Don. Dinner was over, and the men dispersed heading to their vehicles. Outside, Ace commanded Don to ride with him, and one of the group's members would follow in his car. Don was caught off guard and moved motionless toward the long black sedan. The 2 men took off, leaving the rest of A.M.E in the dust. Ace leaning back in the driver's seat of his 750 BMW with both hands on the steering wheel, he looked at Don and said, "I like your style. You've been around before. I need a cool man like you in my circle. I need a right hand," and opened up a compartment, handing Don a block of rubber-banded money. To be continued.